Yep, so we're live.
Great. We're live. Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Canellakis, and this is Cello Bello. It's great to be here. I was very flattered to be asked by Paul Katz, who's a former teacher of mine, to do one of the cello chats, which I've been watching for years. And they're great to bring all the cellists of the world together. A little about myself, I guess I'll say, before we go into questions as they come in. I'm a cellist. I was born and raised right here in New York City, which is where I am right now, quarantined. And I went to the Curtis Institute of Music. I went there for 5 years for undergrad. I studied. Oops. Right here in New York City. You got it. Got a little. Okay. Technical difficulty here for a second. Where was I? I went to the Curtis Institute of Music for 5 years for undergrad. I studied with two people. One was a man named Peter Wiley, a great cellist who still teaches at Curtis. But before I studied with him, I actually started at Curtis with a man named Orlando Cole, who may not be familiar to some of you who are a little younger, but he was 90 years old when I studied with him in my first year. He'd been teaching at Curtis, I think, for almost 60 years at that point. He really personified the Curtis cello world. And I was sort of in his last class before he retired at the age of 93 or 94, something like that. And he lived till the age of 101. So he was a very, very special guy. Probably his most famous student was Lynn Harrell, who, of course, sadly passed away just a few days ago. And that's a real loss for the music world, for the cello world. He was truly one of the great cellists of our time, Lynn Harrell. And I had the chance to work with him in my very first year at Curtis. Mr. Cole brought him in and asked him to teach some lessons to his students. And so he came maybe 5 or 6 times that year and taught lessons, and they were very inspiring. And one of the things that I always noticed about Lynn and really admired was his reverence for Mr. Cole. The way that he always, throughout his entire life and career, came back to Mr. Cole, came to give master classes for his students. They did videos together on cello technique. I think they're kind of hard to find. There may be some on YouTube, them discussing like Seb check and things like that. And I always was very, very touched by his lifelong admiration for Mr. Cole. And then I did a master's degree at New England Conservatory with Paul Katz. I did 2 years there, which was a wonderful experience. And then I came back to New York. And at the very end of my time at NEC, I took an audition for Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, what was called then CMS2. It's now called the Bowers Program, which is a 3-year residency for young artists. And the idea is if you do well during that time, then you are, I suppose, become part of the CMS family, the CMS community. And I was accepted back in 2008, and I've been playing with the Chamber Music Society ever since, which is now 12 years ago. That really was a game changer for me, for my career, that word. But that being accepted into that community and throwing me onto the New York stages and on tour, really just, not only did it give me a lot of work just through the Chamber Society, but it really opened a lot of other doors for me. So the last, let's say 6-7 years, I've been playing a lot of chamber music in my career. I play some concertos, I play a lot of recitals. I have a sort of duo with pianist Michael Brown. We play a lot of recitals together. And I have a what I think is a satisfying mix of chamber music and solo and concertos, recital, chamber music. And it's an unpredictable life, right? Like being in an orchestra is much more stable and also a wonderful path. And some years are busier than others for me. And you're always sort of a little bit worried from season to season, but it also, for me, keeps things really interesting and exciting. And it's the idea of continuing to build on this type of career. Also, a couple of years ago, I sort of put on another hat, which is I'm the new artistic director. Well, not so new anymore, but I'm now in my second year as artistic director of Chamber Music Sedona in Sedona, Arizona, which is a long-running chamber music series out in Sedona. I think we're in our 37th season now. And that has actually been really thrilling for me. Certainly in the last few years, I've had the idea that I'd like to do some more producing, basically. Being an artistic director was always sort of on the back burner for me. And so it's been really fun to add that to the mix. And finally, something that is a bit different is I also have this other side of me that in terms of the arts that I'm interested in, which is filmmaking and acting, and everything that comes with that. I've actually had an interest in filmmaking for a really, really, really long time, but of course, pursued the cello and loved the cello, and the cello, as you all know, is all consuming. But I decided about 5 or 6 years ago that I wanted to see if I could also add, pursue this other passion of mine in some way. And so about 5 years ago, I started taking an acting class in New York with an incredible acting teacher named Alan Savage. And that really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I've been making short films on the side. I had a web series for a little while, and an interview series. I spent the last year and a half making a short film that's been going to some festivals recently. And it's I do some writing, write screenplays, things like that. And for me, what I've found, which has been interesting, is that far from it actually distracting or detracting from my life as a cellist, I think it's actually enhanced. I mean, because you can't play the cello 12 hours a day. There is time to do other things. And I've found by pursuing other art forms like acting, directing, writing, it's actually enhanced me as a musician. It's opened me up creatively. It's been really fascinating for me to see how acting is similar to chamber music, how we're doing a scene with somebody. There's so many similarities to performing a trio with a pianist and a violinist, or the way that you listen to each other. And certainly just the art of performance is really, there's a lot of parallels, and there's a lot that I learned from one that I can apply to the other, and vice versa. So anyway, I guess I just sort of summarized my life. I hope that was interesting. No idea if it was. I'm looking over here now because I'm gonna see if anyone bothered to ask any questions. And if not, I'm just gonna keep talking. Let's see here. No questions. Anyone else? Oh, hello. Which bow edition is better for cello suite Bach? We have very different editions, and I'm really confused. Okay, I think the question is, which edition is better for the cello suites of Bach? Okay, that's a good question. I have this very old Barenreiter edition, which is as clean as you can. As you might know, we don't really have, to my knowledge, an Urtext edition of the Bach cello suites. We have Anna Magdalena, his wife's first wife, I don't remember. She has an edition, and that's sort of the closest thing we have to an urtext. And so I think the Bärenreiter, the old Bärenreiter, I think maybe the new Bärenreiter, although there's might be some weird stuff in the new Bärenreiter. So I have an old Bärenreiter that basically takes from her edition. And I think that's the best place to start. You don't have to follow exactly the bowings and slurs that are there, but at least is the cleanest thing we have. It's the cleanest edition that can be used. And then you can create your own bowings and slurs and stuff on top of that. But I would recommend going with that. There's actually a great little book that has the four earliest editions of the Bach cello suites, and I would check those out. What do you think of the late Lynn Harrell and his movie, and the other case, the famous Dupre movie that went a few years ago? Well, as I said, I spoke about Lynn Harrell already, and so I won't go too much more into that. I had nothing but the most respect for him. I worked with him a couple of times as a student, and he was very, very, he taught what I will say that you might not get from his performances, because his performances speak for themselves. But Lynn Harrell was one of the few teachers that I can describe as teaching emotionally. I'll never forget, I was studying the Shostakovich concerto with him, and there's a part in the third movement, the cadenza. It's where the cello, let me back up a little bit so you see, it's the softest moment in the movement. And it's after these pizzes, and the cello comes in very soft. Like that. And I'll never forget that Lynn Harrell, he was speaking about that, and he said, when you get here, you have to start this E flat where you can't hear it. You have to start from the depths, from nothing, and play as softly as you can. And he started to play like this. He started to play like that, and he started to tear up. And I was just blown away by that he started to actually start to almost cry, thinking about that moment in that concerto and how what he wanted to express with it. And I think about that every time I played this piece. I think about him when I get there. But about his movie, I haven't seen his movie. I saw a trailer of it. It looked interesting. And I also haven't seen the Dupre movie. I know that's sad that I said I was all into movies and I haven't seen 2 movies about classical musicians, but you know, that's the way it is. Okay. Have you ever dealt with a cello? Oh, this is a good question. Have you ever dealt with a cello-related injury? If so, what was your recovery experience like? And how do you keep yourself in good playing shape? Yes, I have. I've dealt with, luckily, nothing that took me out of, nothing truly debilitating. But I had pretty serious tendonitis when I was 18 that took me out of commission for about 2 weeks. But the real injury didn't happen from that. The real injury happened when I tried to come back to the cello. I came back a little too soon, and I didn't come back slowly enough. And then that's when I really kind of hurt myself. And ever since then, when I was 18 and I really messed myself up, I realized how important warm-ups are and how important it is to go gradually. If you do take time off for whatever reason, whether it's injury or vacation or whatever, to go back extremely gradually. And I am extremely diligent and dogmatic about my warm-ups. I do about 45 minutes of scales a day. If I only have 45 minutes to practice, I'll only do scales. And I'll just give you a quick example of what I do. I don't necessarily think these are required for everybody, but this is what's worked for me, which is that the very first few scales I do in a day, I don't even use the bow and I don't press the string down all the way. And I go very slowly and just try to acclimate my hand and my arm and my tendons to pushing the string down. And then each scale, I'll press a little bit more. And maybe after about 5-10 minutes, I'll bring the bow and I'll start to, I kind of raise my fingers a little bit to also to kind of activate the tendons first. And then with each new scale, I'll raise a little bit less until I'm playing normal scales. And for me, it's about kind of acclimating the body every day to what is really an unnatural thing, which is taking extremely hard, high tension steel strings, putting them in your fingertips and using small muscle groups to push them down. It's not what the body was meant for. And I think being very slow every day into acclimating your body into doing that is important. So that's what I do. But most importantly, the one thing that I'm glad about the injury that I had years ago is that it forces me to really listen to my body. And sometimes I'm probably overly sensitive to what I'm feeling if I feel a little dull ache or pain. But I think you're better off being oversensitive than undersensitive to that, because if you're not really listening to some minor aches and pains, that's when they start to build on each other and then you can get a real injury. So just always be listening and feeling your body at the instrument. And if something doesn't quite feel right, you might need to adjust something, you need to figure out if you have tension, and maybe you just need a break. Okay. Would you be able to provide some ways to develop a good tone? And how much does the bow selection play in being able to make a good tone? Well, I think the bow selection, it pretty much is everything with the good tone. Of course, vibrato is very important, but you hopefully should be able to make a decent tone even without vibrato. Well, that's a really tough question to answer, because that takes years and years of sort of sculpting your sound. But I can talk about a couple of points that I think about. One is sort of the obvious, which is that you have to stay relaxed. You should never fight the cello, right? You should never push with tension. You should never be pushing or using tension or really using muscle. It should be all about feeling into the sound and letting the cello speak for itself. And you have to do that using weight, arm weight, momentum, but never pressing. One thing that I think is really important, and I remember Paul Katz talking about this a lot, this also has to do with intonation, is that if you're truly on the intonation of your instrument, like you are in tune with your own strings, the cello should have its own natural vibration that happens. If you play a G on the D string, the C string should be buzzing a little, ringing. The G string should be ringing. If you play a D on the A string, I found the intonation that the D string started to ring on its own. And if you're truly on the resonance of your instrument, not only will you be playing in tune with yourself, but it will be adding so much vibration and resonance to the sound that it will actually enhance the tone. The more ring you have around the sound, the kind of wider and richer the tone is. If you're off, if you're sharp, and the cello isn't ringing, all you get is that kind of narrow pitch versus the resonance that widens the sound. Hope that's helpful. Any helpful tips for better clarity in the low strings, especially quicker passages? Sextuplet section in the Haydn D. Clarity in the low strings. Clarity in the low strings is hard. I guess sometimes, so I haven't thought about it that much, but occasionally I know that in a big hall, if you're playing down here, these notes, you do really need to articulate. I mean, clarity is really about articulation, right? And the bigger the hall, the more reverb is in the hall, the more you have to articulate. So I have noticed that sometimes you can get away with that kind of stroke in a big hall in a way that you may not be able to get away with as much. You probably can't tell that it doesn't make a difference here on Zoom with the microphone in my face. But sometimes you actually do need to make a little more noise and really just always articulate more in the low strings for them to be heard and to have more clarity. Sometimes that means having more bite and fingers on each, but sometimes it just means really just kind of using a kind of vertical attack to punch out every note. I'm just thinking about it. If what I said was good. I stand by it. Okay, I like this question. Can you give a specific example or experience of applying something from acting to cello playing and performing? Yes. I don't know if it's exactly specific, but it's more of a basic principle, which is listening is everything. Maybe that sounds obvious, but actually it's not. If you're truly listening, what I learned from my acting coach, which really kind of opened my eyes, is that basically having an idea about something, about how something should go, whether it is how you want to say a line in a play or how you want to play a phrase in music. Having an idea that's really set is overrated, and sometimes it's destructive. If you're too sure about having a perfectly crafted idea, because if you're playing with somebody else, okay, maybe that works if you're playing a Bach suite, but if you're playing Dvorak concerto with an orchestra, or you're playing a piano trio or a sonata with other people, it's a dialogue, right? And if in acting, his point was, don't have a strong idea about how something will go. Just listen and respond. Truly listen and respond. Because if you say a line, if you say, whatever, I love you, Mary, that's a terrible example, but I'm not going to give an example. But if you say a line a certain way, and then the person says something back, and then you say your next line just the way you had it, you're not really acting. Because you have to actually respond to the person based on how they responded to you. And if you're truly listening, you can do that. And I really think that sometimes that's lost in chamber music. And that's something that I think is really, really important in chamber music, which is, don't just play the way you had the idea that you had. If you're playing a Dvorak piano quartet and the violinist has a melody and then you join the violinist, or the violinist has a melody and then you play the melody later on, you have to be responding in real time to each other. And that creates, I think, really, really, really captivating and music making when people are truly communicating, right? Because it's all about communicating. And I think the audience feels that when musicians are really communicating on stage rather than just being stuck in their ideas. So that would be the primary thing that I think really is really the same with acting and playing music with other musicians. I've seen your recordings of Gankino Horo. Could you tell me any tips of how to play it, how to play with a good rhythmic flow? Do you know any similar melodies? That Gankino Horo sounds cool. Thanks. Thanks, Jan. Jan. Sorry, Jan. Probably Jan. I'm gonna start saying people's names. I apologize that I haven't done that yet. Yes, I fell in love with this Bulgarian folk tune that I found that has a rhythm of 11 beats per bar that sounds like this. And the melody goes. Like that without messing it up. And I decided to make an arrangement of that for cello and piano, make it a kind of virtuoso piece. And it's hard to get the 11 rhythm, but it's really hard. But like, if you just keep doing it, if you keep doing it, just keep playing all the time. For me, at this point, it's like playing in 4. It's somehow just gotten into me, that 11 rhythm, and I don't feel the complex nature of it. So you just have to keep playing until it just goes into your core. That's how I would get the rhythmic flow. Thanks for the question. Let's see here. Question from our YouTube live audience. Could you please talk about the placement of the thumb on the bow hand, and how does one avoid tension in the right hand thumb? Okay, wait a second. Could you please talk about the placement of the thumb on the bow hand and talk about how to avoid tension in the thumb? Well, sure. I don't know how basic we should get here, but of course the thumb goes sort of about right there at the end of the frog part. And I think something you see with students a lot when they first do this bow grip is that they go like that with the thumb. But of course you don't want to do that, because then you're pressing and causing horrible tension here, and this muscle can get very inflamed. And that's happened to me, even with a decent bow grip. No, you want the thumb to be curved sort of the other way, like that. And the thumb should be very, very, very soft. It's the same principle as anything else when you are approaching anything, truly anything having to do with cello technique. You have to be soft and relaxed and not using any tension or muscle. Not any muscle, that's an exaggeration, but you should really be thinking generally along those lines. And so when I put the thumb there, it should be in perfect balance with the other fingers. And then when I put it on the string, I'm really barely holding the bow. I mean, if you were to take the cello out, like I've dropped my bow sometimes. I mean, the bow should kind of always be in balance between what the fingers that you're holding it and actually the resting on the string, so that you're not truly gripping the bow. I don't think of it as a bow grip. It's not. You're just sort of lightly holding it and using the very light hold and the bow to keep it there. So that honestly, if I were to take the cello away, it should kind of be more like that versus like this. You hear it here, and then you put the bow there, and then you just adjust and add the tiniest bit of sense of grip. But really your hand should be truly, truly soft, and particularly the thumb. You have to keep the thumb soft. It's not always easy to do when you want to play loud, fortissimo stuff, sustained playing, sostenuto playing. But you really always do want to keep that in mind. And then occasionally, but truly occasionally, and only in moments like this, I actually just kind of hold the bow like a fist, but just pretend I didn't say that. I mean, I'm talking like maybe 0.1% of the time I'll do that, only in extreme circumstances. Okay, a question from our YouTube live, another question from our YouTube live audience. Dear Nicholas, how do you approach practicing and playing chamber music in a time such as we are having right now, when you are unable to meet with your chamber music partner or group? I'm playing the scherzo from Beethoven's Third Cello Piano Sonata, and I really long for my pianist partner, especially when playing throughout the movement. Well, thank you for the question. Yeah, I didn't, of course, I haven't even really mentioned what we're going through right now. So obviously this is a bizarre and insane time, and a terrible time for everybody, but a terrible time for musicians, right? Because first of all, there are no concerts to play, really. We don't know when they're going to come back. And not only can we not perform, and by extension, make our living, but we can't even really get together and play with other people unless you're living with that other person. But for the vast majority of us, there's not a lot of collaborating going on. And that's really sad, especially for us cellists, you know. I have a number of pianist friends, and they're okay because the piano is such a self-sufficient instrument. They have so many masterpieces just for their own instrument. We have a few, the Bach cello suites, but mostly we're a collaborative instrument, right? And it gets tiring to only play the solo cello music after a while. And it also gets tiring to practice concertos and sonatas by yourself without the prospect of playing it with other people. So look, I'm not going to give you an easy answer. I think that it's difficult, and it's okay to feel really super frustrated right now. And it's also okay to take time off if you need to do that. I'm practicing, but I'm not practicing like I was before. I'm not practicing as many hours as I did when I had a bunch of concerts to play for. In some ways, I've relished the opportunity to take a step back and not be so panicked about learning music all the time and having to constantly be playing. That being said, I am playing every day because I don't want to fall out of shape. And for the reasons I actually said before, getting back into shape is very arduous and difficult, and I'd rather just stay in shape. But I'm also not practicing 6 hours a day. I don't know if that answers your question, but we will all be back to playing with people at some point. And I would say just try to keep staying in shape. And if you have creative ways of playing with people that are satisfying to you, whether it's doing all these videos where you split the screen and all that, that's fine. I personally have not found a lot of satisfaction with that for myself, but I think some people are really enjoying that. So if that's something you would want to try. But otherwise, just have faith that we're all going to be back and playing with each other again. Okay. I have a question from our YouTube live audience. I have long and skinny fingers and arms, and my teacher always told me that I had to keep finding ways to feel closer to my instrument and produce warmer sounds. Do you have any ideas for this? Yo-Yo Ma has very skinny fingers too. I think I kind of have skinny fingers. I don't think skinny fingers are a problem. I don't think skinny fingers are a problem at all. But I do think you want to feel close to your instrument. You want to feel like your instrument is something you can sculpt. With sound, I like to think that the string should be like a boat, that with part of the boat is under the water, and your bow should push the string under the water. You shouldn't be on top of the boat. You should be the boat going into the water, playing to kind of the bottom of the string. Don't think that you're playing on the surface of the string. Imagine that you're literally playing to the bottom of the string, and that you can kind of sculpt the cello that way. But in terms of feeling close, yeah, you should be really connected to your cello. The cello should be like, you should really feel it in your body and in your arms, at your chest, or at your rib cage, wherever the cello is hitting you. It's the best that I can answer that question. I apologize. Let's see here. Where were we? See if I missed anything on YouTube. Let's see. 1 second, guys. 1 second. I don't see the YouTube questions. I don't know why. All right. How do you achieve a polished sound? I can learn notes, but I still sound like a student, and I'm 60. Oh, that's okay. Achieve a more polished sound. Not sure what you mean by a polished sound. I guess you mean clean. Polished sound. Look, we have to use all the tools for sound that we have, right? Which is, as I was saying before, weight of the arm, to produce fullness and volume, momentum, speed, speed, the placement on the string. Like do you play up on the fingerboard to get a more fuzzy sound? Do you play closer to the bridge to have more density in your sound? And then, of course, there's the intonation. And intonation is not, as I was saying before, intonation is not just for the sake of being in tune. Intonation is also for quality of sound. If you're truly in tune with your instrument, then you're going to be adding vibration to the notes. If I play a D and the D string and G string are not ringing, then I'm not in tune. If they are ringing, not only am I in tune, but I'm creating all this extra resonance that's going to enrich the sound. I don't know if that is necessarily a more polished sound, but it's certainly a more beautiful sound, and it's certainly a more enriched sound. Okay, let's see here. Oh, I need to press on that. I don't see. Oh, you're welcome. That was from Anita Zafrani. Hope that helped. I'm not seeing all the comments. Maybe that's all the questions we have for today. Oh, there they are. I'm so sorry. By the way, this is my first Facebook Live thing or whatever, live anything, Zoom Live, YouTube Live. And so I'm sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place. Okay, got it. Here we are. I'm playing the Scherzo from Beethoven's Third Sonata, and I really longed for my pianist partner. Oh, we already covered that. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. You can't play with your pianist Beethoven during COVID-19, and I get it, especially Beethoven, right? Because those sonatas, by the way, are written for piano and cello, not cello and piano. And so playing a Beethoven sonata without a pianist is extremely dissatisfying and unfulfilling. If you can keep practicing it, good. I have not been working on the Beethoven sonatas right now, I will be honest with you, because it's too sad to not play them with people. Any advice for tuning fifths with the thumb in thumb position? Whew! That's the worst. Fifths with the thumb. Because, you know, sometimes I've noticed that like the fifths change every day. Have you ever noticed that? Kind of also depends on the weather and the alignment of the strings. Sometimes I'm putting my thumb like this. Sometimes I'm putting my thumb like that. You definitely want to make sure your cello is aligned and that the strings are really, really well in tune so that you can play a flat sort of perpendicular thumb to the fingerboard, and it'll be in tune. If you have to do something like that or that, either your strings are not in tune or there's something misaligned with the bridge and or the placement of the strings. So I would watch out for that. Other than that, you just gotta wing it and practice it and keep working on it. That was Gustavo. Nathan Brown. Thanks for the help, Nicholas. You're welcome, Nathan. Thanks for the thank you. How do you produce a strong sound out at the tip of the bow? The tip of the bow is not, you're not going to be able to produce a stronger sound generally as at the frog. You're just not. At the frog, you have the advantage of being able to, as I've stressed a lot in the last hour, use weight and basically all weight and verticality. And you don't need to use truly any tension in the hand. Now, at the tip, this is the one place where, unfortunately, that doesn't hold up. To get a loud sound at the tip, let me do it up here. Let me back up so you can see. You because you don't have the advantage of your arm being able to just drop here because you're out here, you're out in outer space. You do need to introduce a little bit of tension between the thumb and the first two fingers to get that kind of sound, that kind of attack. So if you're playing one long bow, what you're actually doing is it's a gradual redistributing of the weight from the arm weight to the hand at the tip and back. And if you were to play, fortissimo out at the tip for 45 minutes straight, it's not going to feel good. So hopefully you can do the bulk of your really loud stuff at the frog, but when you're doing sustained sounds from the bow to the tip, you do need to redistribute and use a little tension between the thumb and the first two fingers to really pound out the sound. Any advice? This is from Byron Klimek. Any advice for the first movement of the Haydn D major? Oh, God. Well, it's just like one of the hardest pieces in the repertoire. And you gotta, do I have any advice for it? Practice it as much as you can. Practice it extremely slowly. Work up the fast passages very, very slowly with the metronome, and play it. And you need to kind of play it light. But at the end of the day, what I will say about it, the most important thing with the Haydn D at the end of the day is that it doesn't sound like you're struggling. It has to sound like you're actually enjoying yourself, which is hard to do in that piece because of how difficult technically it is. But once you get to the performance, you have to kind of put a smile on your face and pretend like it's effortless. Otherwise, the piece fails. Otherwise, the piece, I think, truly fails. So practice it and practice it and practice it. Try not to be self-conscious about all that high stuff. Sometimes you see, two cellists that I think really nail that kind of playing are Yo-Yo Ma and Stephen Isserlis. The harder things get, the more they kind of go back this way and put a smile on their face. And I've always really respected that about them. It's something I've been trying to add to my playing. And I think the Haydn D is a great piece to practice that. Okay, Javier Alvarez. What do you think about scales? Do you prefer practicing them with or without vibrato? The same for arpeggios and double stops. I think very highly about scales. I play scales every day, as I said before. I do about 45 minutes of scales every day. I do them primarily as warm-ups. I do them less necessarily about practicing, less about actually technique and more about truly warming up my body, warming up my hands, my arms, but also they are just the best thing for just practicing basic positions. First position, second position, third position, E major, most need to be on third, second position, first, all that stuff. And just making sure that any position you're playing in, and then if you're doing extensions, D major scale starts off with 2 extensions, right? That you just have those solid, that those are just there, ready to go, always to be in tune, no matter what position you're playing in. But also I believe in them really as warm-ups. Vibrato or no vibrato, I think I do both. The first few scales I play in the day where I'm barely pressing the string down, just to warm up, I'm not using vibrato. But by the last few scales of the day, I play them, kind of try to play them lyrically, like they're a piece of music. And then that's when you can work on your vibrato, your sound quality, your intonation, all the things. Ellen Cello, what do you think? I played since I was 5 and now I'm 16. So my question is, do you think that I could study the cello? I'm playing the Brahms Sonata and of course, a few movements of the Bach suites. Yeah, why couldn't you study the cello? Anybody can study the cello. You should study the cello. I don't know, I can't tell you anything past that, but if you like the cello, and you have a cello and you like Brahms and Bach, please play the cello. The world needs more cellists. That's what I think. You should most definitely do that. Let's see if there's any I missed. I'm gonna go back over here. Okay. Do you use the thumb as a bass for the vibrato with another finger? This is from Diego Zapata Caldato. Hi, do you use the thumb as a bass for the vibrato with another finger in high positions? Do I use the thumb as the bass for the vibrato? Well, if you're in a high position, yeah, the thumb is going to be a bass somewhere. No matter where you're playing, the thumb is going to be there on the string. You're not going to have your thumb up here or underneath there. So your thumb's going to be around. I don't know if I would say I think about the thumb as a bass for vibrato, but the thumb is going to be planted there. Hopefully not in a tight way, hopefully in a very, very relaxed way. If you need to use it, then you're gonna have to press down. But if you're not using it, and I'm playing up here, then the thumb should be relaxed, but planted there, but very soft. Thanks for the question. I'm gonna reload this, look back over here. My friends on YouTube. Do you include, oh, this is a really good question. Dylan Kenevi. When will Yo-Yo Ma be on Conversations with Michael Brown and Nick Canellakis? Now, I think you said Conversations with Michael Brown and Nick Canellakis as a little jab to me, which if that's the case, good job. I like where you went with that. Do you know Yo-Yo? I asked Yo-Yo, he's like my dream guest. We haven't done Conversations in a long time, in like 4 years, as you may have noticed. Conversations with Nick Canellakis, by the way, was a web series, interview show, kind of comedic web series that Michael Brown, my pianist and best friend, put on. We did 19 episodes, kind of like satirical interviews with famous musicians. And I would love for Yo-Yo. I actually spoke with Yo-Yo a few years ago and asked him to be on it. And he said absolutely, and it never happened. So maybe one day, maybe one day. Thanks for the question. Okay, let's see what else we got here if I missed anything. Do you, this is from Cello Para, do you include right hand exercises in your practice? If so, which? That's a good question, because I know I talked about mostly about left hand warm-ups. The answer is not as much. I probably should, but not as much in terms of the warm-up department, other than the fact that when I start using the bow and the scales, I play very, very softly, because I don't want to start the first thing of the day to play loud with a lot of intensity, because I want to also warm up my right arm into playing. So I start very softly, and then eventually get to a place where I'm like playing more normally. But what I will say is stretching. I also do a lot of stretching. So, just basic, whatever stretches you can come up with, but also kind of like some hand stretches like that. Nothing too extreme. But I think that's also important, even before you start doing the warm-ups. Oh, okay, Ellen Cello, you meant by studying, you mean studying cello at a university. You mean studying cello at a university. Ellen, I think if that's what you want to pursue, I think you should. I think you should try if you want to audition for music conservatories. You absolutely should. No one knows how well anyone's going to do in these auditions, what schools you'll get into. That's always a difficult thing. But if your heart is telling you to pursue music school, do it. It's a tough time right now with COVID-19 for musicians. I will say that. I'm not going to lie to you about that. But still, I think you should pursue whatever. If that's a dream of yours, do it. Okay, this is a good question. Hello, Nicholas. What are your favorite, this is from Alejandro. What are your favorite contemporary pieces for cello? Any unknown gem you love? Also, do you enhance your cello sound with modern devices like synthesizers and sound processors? I'll start with the last question. The answer is no. I don't enhance my sound with any modern devices like synthesizers or sound processors. I don't know what a sound processor is. Sounds interesting. No idea what it is. But about contemporary pieces, I have to admit, I'm not like as much in the know on every aspect of the contemporary music world as some of my colleagues. But sure, there are some great pieces being written. The person that I play the most is Michael Brown. Michael Brown is a pianist-composer. He lives in fact, I can look at his building from my apartment. He's my best friend and pianist partner in recitals, and he's an incredible composer. He's written 4 pieces for me. And we play a piece by his on almost every recital I play. So the last one he wrote for me was called Prelude and Dance, and it's fantastic. He has a really individual voice, and he really knows how to write for cello, also because I helped him with that. But no, he's great. So I would check out the music of Michael Brown. This question is from, okay, Mariska 9943. What is the best an adult beginner could realistically hope for? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what you mean by realistically hope for. I think it's easier to play a stringed instrument when you started young. You probably are aware of that yourself, because it's such an unnatural thing for the body that literally when you start when you're 6 or 7, literally as you're growing up, your body is sort of adapting as it grows, which you can't do when you're an adult. But I'm a big fan of people learning instruments at any age, if that's what you want to do. You know, I mean, in terms of realistically hope for, again, what does that mean? Does that mean you want to have a career like Yo-Yo Ma, or you want to be in an orchestra, or you just want to be able to play with your friends or play for yourself? I think if you want to play an instrument, you should learn it. You should learn it and just go for it. I think it's just great. And I love the idea of adults starting an instrument for the first time. Stephanie. Hi, do you know any cellists that started playing as an adult 22 plus and became great? I don't know offhand. But again, don't worry about how great you're going to become. If you want to play the cello because you love the cello and you want to play some of that music, just do it and see how great you become later. It will still take many years, but just go for it. Just do it. But keep your expectations in check, because it's a really long journey. It's a long journey to be able to play and make a good sound. You're probably not going to be able to make a beautiful sound for at least a year. Maybe, you know, but do it anyway, if that's what you want to do. Allie, if one is a classically trained clarinetist who has always just wanted to learn cello for the fun of it and beauty of the instrument, what would you think is the biggest challenge based on the nature of the instrument? Well, of course, the clarinet is just a different animal, right? So, I mean, it couldn't be more different. What is the biggest challenge? Everything. You may, maybe the separate, well, actually you're used to that, but like kind of the separate roles of the two hands. The fact that, you know, most people are right-handed, but you're not using your primary hand to do all this dexterous stuff in the left hand. and then, you know, this has such a different function, and sort of merging those two things. It'll be complicated, but it would be complicated if I started the clarinet. I mean, I can't imagine. It's like, it just like, you know, using my breath and embouchure and all that stuff. It's like a completely different technique. So it'll be different. You should do it anyway. Try it. Which brand of strings do you recommend? From Gerson. I recommend experimenting with strings and seeing what fits your cello the best. If you have an extremely bright, overly bright cello, you might want a string that warms up the cello. If you have a slightly darker, more muted cello, you're going to want a string that maybe packs a punch. My cello is rather powerful and focused. And so I've actually looked for strings that warmed it a bit. And the string that I found that warmed it the best on the A string is a Larsen medium Magnicore. Larsen medium Magnicore. And I have a Yargar medium superior, are they called? Yargar medium superior on the D. And I've got two Spiracore Versums on the G and the C, which are powerful, but also I think have a little bit of warmth added to the power. A little more warmth than the classic Spiracore tungstens. These Versum Spiracores are Versum Tomastics. It gets confusing after a while. But that's how it is. All right, let's see if we got any more questions here. I believe Franz Halmerson started the party late. What does that mean? What does that mean, Tim? Biographical question from John Pankratz. I recall that you and your Curtis pals recorded the Beethoven. Oh my God. I recall that you and your Curtis pals recorded the Beethoven excerpts from Michael Hollinger's wonderful play Opus at the Ardent Theater in Philly. I understudied the role of the cellist, so I mimicked your playing. I was a student of Paul Katz, so I faked it reasonably well. Whatever happened to that play? Wow, John, this is a blast from the past. That's so cool. Again, that's something from like my interest in a different world. But you're absolutely right. I had a quartet when I was at the Curtis Institute called the Vertigo String Quartet, and there was a play premiering in Philadelphia called Opus about a string quartet, playing Beethoven's Opus 131st, Beethoven Opus 131, and working on it. And I remember they smashed the violin at the end of the play. And it was a really good play. And yes, we recorded the musical excerpts and they mimed to our performance live. And you understudied. That's so cool. Whatever happened to the play, I'll tell you what happened. I saw it in New York a couple of years later. It played at 54th Street in New York, and it was great. Other than that, I think I maybe had some contact with Michael Hollinger, the playwright, but I don't know where else it went after that. But I remember thinking that was a really nice play. Cool. Thanks for that. Okay, what else we got here? Larsen is great. You're right. Are there any other questions? Let's see if I missed anything, okay? I mean, we've been going for an hour. Pretty good. Those of you that have stuck with me. Benyaminu Sana says good with an emoji. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me just refresh. It's fun. You guys having fun? I'm having a lot of fun. How about you guys? See if I take a look at these questions. Maybe, did I miss anything? William, did I miss anything? Oh, here's a couple more. Oh, this is a good question. Thank you for the question, Dylan. Will Thin Walls be available to watch at some point? Thank you. Thin Walls is really important to me. As I was saying before, Thin Walls, maybe I didn't say this before. Thin Walls is the name of the short film that I've been working on for the past year and a half. And it's been going to some festivals, some of which now obviously have been canceled. But I wrote a short film and we filmed it and I've edited it and now it's at festivals, which is about a young woman who's a writer who moves into a new apartment to write her magnum opus, a novel. And she finds out her next door neighbor is a cellist that practices all day long. And it's called Thin Walls. And I actually am planning on putting it online soon. I don't know exactly when yet. You're not supposed to have it online when it's at festivals, but it looks like there are going to be no more festivals because of COVID-19. So I probably will be putting it online soon. Thank you for the question. I appreciate that, Dylan. Oh, Mariska's having fun. Thank God someone's having fun aside from me. Can you show us how to do up staccato like in Piatti Caprice number 12? That's from Gerson. Gerson, no, I can't. I'm not gonna do that. Sorry, I haven't played the Piatti Caprices in a long time, and I don't do a whole lot of up staccato. I'm not gonna lie to you. Not the biggest fan.
We got a couple of questions from back into Facebook. Mary Beth Bryant asks, not sure if you saw, what exercises do you use to teach Collet? Thanks.
Thank you. What exercises do I use to teach Collet? I don't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna be honest. What is Collet again? Is that like this kind of thing? I actually don't remember some of like the actual words for each of the bow strokes. If you were to type what it is, I forget some of the words sometimes of like all the, like fancy bow techniques, because sometimes I think they're a little over labeled. You kind of just need to use your intuition rather than just thinking, oh, for that passage I'm going to use this bow stroke, this Italian bow stroke, and for that passage I kind of feel like it should be a little bit more fluid than that. So I don't always know what exactly the specific thing I'm doing is. So I'm sorry that I'm not able to answer that question so well for you.
It says collet means glued. It's a short stroke. It's when it begins with the bow lightly contacting the string.
Oh yeah, so it is kind of like that, right? Like that kind of thing. I think I remember that. I don't think I do that stroke very much. I don't think I do that. Maybe that's like the slow version of spiccato. But I don't think I do that. I just don't think I do stuff like that. I don't do a lot of like hand motions when I play. I kind of think it should all be fluid in one thing. So I don't, except maybe for like spiccato, which is really just focused in here. But most of the time I'm just thinking of the whole thing as one fluid thing. I know that's probably not helpful, but that's just the way I think about it. Thanks, but having fun, really, says Alonzo Lopez Romo. Thank you, I am too. But wishing still to hear something about up staccato. Why is everyone obsessed with up staccato? I don't really do up staccato that much. I just don't. Like in the Rococo variations, I don't do it. I do it regular. Occasionally I'll do like, no, I don't do it. And I really regret doing that just now. Occasionally, like a few notes, like in the Haydn D or the Paganini Moses variations for like 6 notes. But other than that, I avoid it like the plague, up staccato, like the plague. Life is too short to learn up staccato. Sorry, I didn't mean to yell. What do you like most about playing the cello? Okay, Suzanne, Angela Dicker. What I like the most about playing the cello is that I get to play music, and I don't mean to sound trite. Is that the right word? What I mean is that I'm not actually that obsessed with the instrument of the cello, but I think it's an incredible instrument to play music and to express yourself on. And it has some of the most glorious melodies and moments in all of music, right? And we get to play them. And so I love using the cello to play all this incredible music, using it as like my voice, as like almost like an extension of my body. And that's what excites me about playing the cello more than focusing on specific cello techniques. Yoshi, hi, could you please give some advice on improving vibratos, making them under control with various speeds or nuances without being intense? Okay, what I'll say about that, and that's a good question. A cello bellow. Nice to see and hear you. Collé is from Galamian, adapted by Rose for the cello, and it's an exercise for finger flexibility in the grip. See? Still getting a lesson. Thanks. I didn't know that it was developed by Galamian. That's good to know. And adapted by Rose for the cello. That's really cool. Okay, where was I? Oh, about vibrato. What I will say is, this is possibly the one of the most important things actually about vibrato for having variety in sound, and something that I do fear is overlooked sometimes in like great players, which is having a variety of vibrato. So often you just see people play any phrase with the same vibrato, and sometimes it's so beautiful that it works, but there's no variety to it. And it's so important. I remember my teacher, Peter Wiley, talking so much about using vibrato to make a phrase. You know, if you play, you know, you have to this A flat should have a different kind of vibrato than that A flat. It shouldn't be the same, right? And that gives you a lot of variety in phrasing. So always look for different speeds, different widths to, and you're using those to support your phrase. And if you're looking for tips to improve it, just take one note. Sometimes you can practice vibrato slowly too, like this. And then gradually speed up just to see what kind of control you have with your vibrato. And until you do really fast and narrow, and then you slow it down. You know, you could do practice techniques like that.
We got a question from Tim Yanov asking, what do you wish you had done differently in your cello path?
That's a really good question. What do I wish I'd done differently in my cello path? Well, I mean, so many things, but I mean, I wish I'd done things differently in all aspects of life. I mean, regret is a dangerous path to go down. Do I wish I'd practiced a little more? Obviously. I wish I had sort of buckled down when I was at Curtis a little bit better. I was a little bit all over the place when I was there. It's tough. It's tough. I don't really know. I think there's a lot of ways I could have done things better, but I don't know if I could point to one particular thing that I would do differently. So that's a really tough question to answer. I did try, but we just gotta, I kind of wish I knew as much as I feel I know now about how to be a performer and how to get around the instrument, that I wish I'd known more about that then, like 10, 15 years ago, but I'll probably say the same thing in 15 years about now. So, you know, that's life. That's life.
We got a question.
Oh yeah.
Sorry. From our YouTube live audience, from
Yeah.
Deborah, saying, what are some inspirational pieces to study during the current health situation, and how to stay motivated when in isolation?
Thank you. Okay, well, Bach is obviously the best one for us, right? Because it's self-sufficient. We don't need, it doesn't involve other players. So Bach is going to be your best friend. I've been working almost exclusively on the Sixth Suite. I've also been doing Paganini Moses variations just for technique to get my. I was supposed to perform that in April, and that got canceled. But I kept working on it because I feel like it's just great to keep my chops in shape. But in terms of musical satisfaction, I think Bach is really the number one. And the Sixth Suite for me, I actually never learned the Sixth Suite. I'm ashamed to say, so this has been the most incredible opportunity for me to learn it. And that is pretty rich because it doesn't get more, I don't think you can find a more complete piece for just the solo cello than the Sixth Suite. Dylan says, at Michael Brown, please write a piece for Nick that is entirely up bow and down bow staccato. Dylan, what are you doing, man? What are you doing, Dylan? Come on, Dylan. Dylan, stop. Just stop, Dylan. Okay, have you thought of, Sylvelin says, have you thought of teaching privately online? I haven't, but I would not be terribly opposed. Okay, this is a good question from Sinev Miller. Do you think some musicians are just naturally gifted, or do they just practice more? This is kind of like an age-old question. The answer is yes and yes. I do think some musicians are just naturally gifted. I think there is such a thing as talent, and I think there's such a thing as talent in any craft. But talent is useless and worthless without work, and a lot of work, a lot of practice. And probably at the end of the day, practice is still the most important thing. So it requires both things. And it's a scary place to start to analyze your own talent. I don't know if there's any use to that. I think you're better off just figuring out if you're doing both enough work and the right kind of work, because it's not just about number of hours, it's also about the quality of the work that you do and your ability to know what kind of quality of work you're doing. So I would look at those things.
Daniel asks, any new episodes of Conversations with Nick Canellakis soon? And Suzanne asks, can you talk about what you gained from studying with Peter Wiley?
Sure. Any new episodes of Daniel Lim? Any new episodes of Conversation with Nick Canellakis? I wouldn't hold your breath, I'm afraid. The last episode we did was with Itzhak Perlman, which was in like maybe 2015, and it's almost, I mean, what do you mean it's almost? It's 2020. I don't know if we're going to do any more of them, but as I was saying a little bit before, I am very much active in that other passion of mine, the film world. And I've been working on a film the last year and a half, a short film, and there's a lot more stuff in that world to come, but may not be exactly the Conversation show. But I appreciate you asking, and I guess that means that you're a fan or that you've watched some, and if that's the case, thank you. Melissa Meal Richardson says, thanks for telling it like it is. Re up-bow staccato. You're welcome, Melissa. You're welcome. Can you talk, Suzanne said, Angela Dicker says, can you talk about what you gained from studying with Peter Wiley? So much. I gained so much from Mr. Wiley. He is one of the great cellists. He has a truly unique way of playing. And I learned a lot from him. I would say the thing that there's a very kind of specific technical thing that I learned from him that I think about all the time. It's actually not technical, it's actually musical or some kind of combination, which I mentioned before, which is the idea of vibrato, of using vibrato to shape your phrase. That really no two notes should have the same vibrato. That if there's a crescendo, that it shouldn't just be the bow that's crescendoing, but it should be the vibrato that's changing. If there's a diminuendo, the same way. Because there's a difference between doing this. What I just did there is I made a diminuendo with the bow and the vibrato stayed the same. But if I do this, the vibrato is diminuendoing also. I'm not saying you have to always do that, but it changes the expression. And that's something very pivotal I learned from Peter Wiley. Also his concept of sound, of verticality at the cello, not playing always just on the surface, you know, not that kind of thing, but into the string with a sense of depth and verticality is quintessential Peter Wiley, and something that I really, really value about how to make a sound that kind of has integrity versus just floats on the top of the string. Nice.
Alan Simpson asks, have you ever played the unfinished Dark Pastoral Concerto by Vaughan Williams?
No, I haven't, Alan. I don't even know it, but I love Vaughan Williams. I'm surprised I don't know about it. I'm going to look that up.
And
really interesting.
Someone else asks, how do you find the purpose of playing the cello during this time, or during any time?
How do you find the purpose of playing the cello? And let's say during this time, it's been hard. It's been hard during this lockdown time. It's been very hard for me to reckon with my life as a cellist going forward. At the thought of, first of all, when all the concerts got canceled, the thought that more concerts are going to be canceled to come. I've gotten very used to in the sort of adult part of my career practicing for concerts. You know, I have a goal. I have to play a certain piece at a certain time, and I'm going to practice for that. And the last time, and right now, I'm practicing just to be a cellist, right? And the last time I did that was like when I was a teenager. And it hasn't been an easy transition, actually. I can't say that comes so naturally to me, but I'm trying to find the merit in it. I'm trying to find the merit in just playing the cello to play the music that I love, and also to keep exploring how to improve myself as a cellist. Because one day we will be back, and I better be sounding good, you know? I better have my chops up, and I better be still exploring my identity as a musician. So this is the time to do that. Right.
I think there was an earlier question from Stephanie asking, can you get some kind of a scholarship to study the cello, even if you're currently studying something else, assuming you're good enough?
Yeah, I think, well, a lot of schools offer scholarships for studying cello. Certainly a lot of the conservatories do, and a lot of universities that have music programs can offer. It doesn't, I mean, it can be difficult to get them. I think they're usually almost always merit-based, these scholarships. So they certainly exist, yes.
Okay, I think that marks the end of the questions. So if you can give any closing remarks, that would be great.
Okay. Well, well, it's been great being with all of you. Thanks for all your questions. And I hope I could share some insight. And this is a really difficult time. I don't even need to say that, right? It's obvious. It's hard to figure out what to do with yourself as a cellist. We don't get to play with people in general right now. We don't have concerts, and it's scary. But we just got to keep working and keep believing that we're going to be back, because we will. And we all want to be sounding good and in shape, so we have to keep practicing. And also what I'll say is, but don't just practice. Use this time to do other things that you maybe want to do. Read books, watch great films, do some writing, explore other art forms, because you may not have as much time as you do now to do that. And I promise you, that will not only make you feel enriched in your life, but it will make you a better musician. That much I can guarantee. So with that, shall we call it a day?
Sure.